leadership is an evolution, or at least for me, it's a constant evolution.
Welcome to this week's As Unexpected podcast, when we talk to C-suite executives, entrepreneurs, and philanthropists about how they lead into the future when the future generally goes as unexpected. I'm Scott Marshall, your host, and my own professional experience has made me a believer that it's not how you show up when all goes as planned, but it is how you show up when things go as unplanned. Given all of their experiences, each of our guests has become very attuned to the fact that the future is not to be predicted. My hope is that this podcast can help all of you become better leaders by building the core leadership capabilities for leading in an uncertain world. Welcome to another episode of As Unexpected. I am so excited that my guest today is Oliva. Anne, can you please give our audience a little bit background about yourself and your current position?
Yeah, sure. And first, thank you so much for having me. You emailed me not that long ago, and I jumped on the opportunity to talk with you both about leadership, but also as a Semester at Sea alum. It was just an exciting invitation. So right now, I am the CEO of the National Alliance to End Homelessness, which is a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization based in Washington, D.C. with a very, very simple mission. And that mission is to end homelessness in the United States. So I've been here just shy of 2 years as the CEO.
Yeah. And, I looked at your LinkedIn profile, and this is the type of work that you've been doing for a long time, it seems to me. So can you also just provide some context of the journey that led you to this current role with the Alliance?
Sure. It's a long one. I've been doing this for 30 years or so, even though I hate to admit it most days that I've been doing it for that long. But I actually started in this work as a VISTA volunteer. I worked at the Women's Housing Coalition in Albuquerque, New Mexico, when I graduated from the University of Pittsburgh, and really fell in love with the work of ending homelessness for individuals. That particular program served women with kids who were experiencing homelessness, but really fell in love with the work. But I think more importantly, fell in love with the people, both my colleagues and the people we were serving in our programs, and ended up having a career in this work where I've wound my way through the sector. I've worked in, as a VISTA volunteer in a local nonprofit. I have worked in larger nonprofits at the regional level. I spent 10 years at the federal level, most recently as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Special Needs Programs. That means that I ran all of HUD's homeless programs and HIV programs, and then went back down into community and started working in community again. When in 2022, my colleague who ran the National Alliance to End Homelessness for close to 30 years decided to retire, and I threw my hat in the ring.
Well, I think the country is fortunate to have you in this role, given your deep experience and clearly your lifelong commitment to this work. So as we talked about earlier, the purpose of this podcast is really to talk to leaders about how they show up for themselves and for their team members and for their community members when things go as unexpected. And my belief is that things more often than not go as unexpected, even though we need to plan. So what I'm hoping is you can share at least one story with our audience about how you showed up and how you worked with your team, give an example of something that really was unexpected and how that played out for you.
I mean, you don't get to 30 years in without having had many, many unexpected things happen within your career and within the sector of work that you do. I think I can speak to that by talking a little bit about our work to end veteran homelessness. I was a senior executive in the federal government, but I was career. I was not a political appointee. I was a career civil servant. But I was sort of the highest level career civil servant in homelessness specifically, right? So it was my job to help the government, help my agency, help my office to meet the goals that were set, by the administration. And the administration that I'm referring to, even though I served in 3, the administration that I'm referring to right now is the Obama administration. We set some goals around ending veteran homelessness in a pretty short period of time. We gave ourselves 5 years to do it. And it was a bold goal. It was something that we managed to every single day. And about a couple of years into really doing well and, implementing programs using evidence-based practices, having my team really working with the VA team in lockstep in terms of what we were doing, the policies that we're putting forward, the practices that we were encouraging our communities to put in. We had been having declines over the first few years. And in fact, we won as a team. We won what is called a SAMmy. It's the Samuel Heyman Awards here in Washington, D.C. And it's basically like the Oscars of government service, right?
You were doing the right work.
We were doing the right work. And as we were doing that right work, we saw something unexpected happen, which was that, as we were analyzing our data for, I think it was like the 3rd or 4th year of this initiative, we didn't meet our goals. And not only did we not meet our goals, but the trajectory was going in the wrong direction. It wasn't going up, but it wasn't going down. It was pretty flat. And we had to reassess what we were doing. It's easy to pat yourself on the back when things are going well. But what we ended up having to do was go back to the drawing board and sit down with each other and troubleshoot every single possible thing that could have gone wrong. Was it that? Was it this other thing? How do we determine which of these potential factors are the thing that really made us not meet our goals? And we had to report to the White House. I had to go to the White House to tell them that not only had we not met our goals, but why we thought we hadn't met our goals. And that was a humbling experience. It was, but it was also a learning experience for me and for my team. And as the leader, I had to keep morale up. It's easy to get sad when things don't go exactly the way you want them to. I had to figure out what the data was telling us and make mid-course corrections that would help us to meet our goals in the long run.
So I'm hearing a number of things here. First of all, that you didn't play the blame game, right? Something goes unexpected. You aren't meeting the outcomes that you and your team were seeking, and you didn't start by starting to find who's to blame for this.
Correct.
You really seemed like you were going to be diligent in understanding cause by looking at all the data.
Yeah, pretty focused on the data because the data tells the story. And in fact, some of what we found were unintended consequences that we never thought about for policy and program decisions that we were making at the federal level and pushing down to the local level. And what I mean by that is, for example, we wanted to serve veterans who had been outside the longest first. We wanted to make sure that we were targeting Vietnam era veterans, folks who had severe PTSD and other disabling conditions. But we also set a set of standards for leaders within the VA and within HUD around how quickly we were moving resources. And those two things, it turns out, don't actually go together. You can't move quickly and target folks who need the help the most. You have to take time to target the folks who need the help the most. And then speed comes later. So it was a lesson that we learned, and we applied for the rest of the time we did that work inside of the Obama administration.
So that's awesome. I love the story. And another thing I'm picking up from what you were sharing is you took the accountability. You were the senior leader.
That's right.
So you were the one who was willing and able to go and report these data to those who were going to hold you responsible. Now, tell me how that felt for you in going forward in that environment to the White House to report these disappointing results.
So it was terrifying. I mean, just to be completely honest about it, it was pretty terrifying, especially for someone who had been getting the results that we wanted for the few years prior, to have to go back to my leadership to my secretary within the department, and then have to go explain it to the White House was absolutely terrifying. But the fact is that they were also good leaders as well, and they weren't mad. Their response back to me was a lesson in and of itself, which was, what do you need from us to fix the problem? What is it that we can leverage in order to get you back to where you need to be? And they didn't play the blame game either.
That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. And, within my organization, we have very simple outcomes, if you will. That is, how many people can we get on a ship and what's the quality of their experience? There's relatively easy, right? And if we're not hitting our numbers, or somehow some aspect of the quality of our programming falls off, ultimately I have to be the one to explain that to our board, right?
Yep.
And I love what you said about, I got to be honest, I was terrified, because that shows you're bringing the whole person to the leadership role as well. I mean,
that's right.
I can't go to my team here and say, it's all going to be fine, and then go to the board and say, I'm terrified about the results, or vice versa, right? Bring the whole person all the time.
All the time. And I'm a very much what you see is what you get kind of person. I'm going to say the same thing to a person who's experiencing homelessness as I'm going to say to my staff members, as I'm going to say to my board of directors or my agency, secretary. I'm going to tell you all the same thing, because I don't sugarcoat things. And I think if you were to ask people who worked with me back then, and certainly now, they will tell you that I always speak truth to power, even if it is an uncomfortable truth.
Yeah. The other things that I like to talk about in leadership a fair amount is this mix of courage and curiosity, that they play so well together. But if you're lacking one, the other one is handicapped, if you will, or is not enabled enough. And what you've shared with me really lives into that idea of, you got to have the courage when faced with difficult circumstances, and the curiosity to really understand the underlying dynamic was such a complex issue that you're trying to deal with.
I think that's right. And like you said, one without the other actually tends to put you on the wrong path, right? You have to be open enough to change your mind about what's happening. And you have to be courageous enough to tell people who can either help you or who have some responsibility and accountability as well. I was accountable for this work, but so was my secretary, and so was the White House. And there were expectations about whether we were going to meet certain kinds of goals. It wasn't just me. It wasn't only my accountability. And having both of those attributes is incredibly important.
This episode of As Unexpected is sponsored in part by Semester at Sea, a study abroad program for college students and adults on career breaks, sabbaticals, or retired, interested in learning and exploring the world together. Learn more about the Lifelong Learner program at www.semesteratSea.org. I'd like to follow up with another question related to this, because it's something that we're faced with in my organization, and I think most people get this challenge, and that is, if there's a simple definition of curiosity that I like to use, it's the open mind to change my mind. That is, to the open mind to change what I believe to be true. I like any human being, I sit here today with you with a certain set of beliefs. I have some things I believe to be facts. But if I am truly curious, then I will always be willing to question what I believe to be true. So do you have other examples from your professional career, perhaps in your current role, where you really have to be open, just as you were with the case of not meeting goals with the longest, homeless veterans? You had to question the interaction effect and understand it better. Do you have other examples of where you really have to bring that curiosity and willingness to change what you believe to be true?
Yeah, I think leadership is an evolution, or at least for me, it's a constant evolution. It is constantly thinking about what I'm hearing from the team that works with me here at the National Alliance to End Homelessness and reformulating. What I'm not willing to reformulate, just to be clear, are my core values. My core values are my core values. And that's, a line that I draw and that I won't cross. However, I hire people, and I think that this is part of solid leadership as well. I hire people with different lived experience from me, different backgrounds, different education. I want all of those people in my orbit for exactly the reason that you're suggesting it's good, right? Which is, I believe my thing based on my own set of education and experience, and somebody comes to me with a different perspective, and the ability to listen to that perspective and to incorporate it into my evolving sort of leadership practice is really important. And, as an example here at the Alliance, one of the things that we do that we're very well known for is we put on conferences twice a year. We have the largest convening of homeless service providers and people who are experiencing or have experienced homelessness in the country, and we do it twice a year.
Wow.
And bringing 2,000 people together twice a year for a very robust agenda is no easy task.
No doubt.
And when I came in, I was like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? This is so much work. Everything, like my bias was towards, like, is there a way for us to streamline this or cut this down? But over the time that I've been here and seeing the impact that the conference has, not just on the folks who attend, but on the field at large and on our own staff's ability to use the planning process to educate themselves and understand what's happening, like at the nitty gritty level in the field, so that our policy, when we work on Capitol Hill, I am giving lawmakers the best and most granular information that I can give them. It took me, I think, at my third conference, I was like, I understand this now. It took me 3 conferences to get there, but I got there, and it really changed the way that I think about my own work and my own voice and how to use it.
I love it. There's so many leaders that I've seen over my career who want to make change quickly, right? They come in, they've been given a stamp of authority, and they spot a couple of things. They're like, I'm going to use my authority to quickly change what I don't see working. And what you've shown there is truly that curiosity and some patience to learn, to observe, and then to really be open to what impact it could have, not just on the community and your team, but you as well. That's a great example.
Yeah. And, now I'm bringing other people along with me who are new and ask the same questions, right?
Yeah. There's, I have a similar example in my own mind. When I joined this organization, I realized that there's so much work we do in hiring our faculty and staff for every voyage. every voyage, there's a different group of faculty and staff. It's like we're an HR and onboarding organization. And I thought, well, this just can't continue. But of course, I didn't come and make the change. I just wanted to learn. And what happens is, first of all, there's just constraints in the market and your ability to hire anybody for any longer. And second, each voyage is its unique community, and there's great value in the uniqueness of that community. And so we do that work still. We hire faculty and staff for nearly every voyage. Again, learning through observation rather than changing quickly just because of authority.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that I changed on my first day was I changed the furniture in my office. I didn't actually change the physical furniture. I rearranged the furniture. I felt like the woman who was in this role before me is such an icon in our field, and she was such a mentor of mine that if I didn't change the furniture, I would feel like I was squatting in her office.
I love it.
So I did change that, but I took some time to learn the rest of the organization.
I love it. So, Anne, thank you so much. It's been a great conversation thus far. I want to take a minute right here to bring Cookie and Cam into our conversation. I think they posed a very interesting question given your background and given just the change across generations, technology, the economy, the politics. It really focuses on leadership traits. So let's bring them in for just a minute, and then I'll see what your response is.
Thinking about leadership, what are some key qualities and traits that made the successful leader of yesterday? And what qualities do the most innovative leaders of today demonstrate? Cookie, what are your thoughts?
I think that there are probably a lot of things that are similar between the two, but just given the nature of how the world is always changing and culture is always changing, there are definitely things about today's leaders that are probably different than yesterday's. I think it also differs across different industries or what they're leaders for or of. But yeah, I think there's probably a connection, but also something new as well.
I think you're right. And I think both consumers and employees alike are looking for leadership in some of these tougher social moments and just tougher times in history that we've endured post-pandemic and just in the grand scheme of things. So really curious on who stands out in the crowd as far as leadership goes.
So Anne, what do you think about Cookie and Cam's question?
It's a great question. And, a few things stand out to me about what made a good leader of yesterday. And some of that yesterday is my own yesterday, right? Like you can go way back to the 50s and the 60s or the 70s, but some of that yesterday is 30 years ago when I started in this field. And what makes a really strong leader of today. And I think, I would be remiss as a Latina myself if I did not first mention that like strong leaders of yesterday were often white men who had to project strength above all else to be taken seriously as a leader, and had to be able to operate in a hierarchy in a way that I think is probably a little bit foreign to a lot of folks today. Certainly my career in government had a pretty strong hierarchy, but I've always kind of bristled against that hierarchy myself. It's not my style. So I think that really strong leaders of yesterday had a number of really good attributes that were aligned with the times that we were living in, even when I started in this role. When I started at HUD, I was the only Latina on my floor in my area, my department of HUD. And I was the youngest office director, probably by at least 20 years. And it was intimidating. It was an intimidating place to be. So I think that's, in its time, that was really important stuff in addition to subject matter expertise. And I think leaders of today are being looked to by, younger generations to have vulnerability, to lead with honesty and vulnerability and not have to be forced to project that strength all the time. I think there are times for that, but there's also times for letting people know that you're a human being in a leadership position. I think that diversity of experience and diversity period is something that leaders of today have, including lived experience. In my own field, having lived experience of homelessness is increasingly important in leadership positions. I think that there's also a set of attributes related to being able to be flexible in a rapidly changing environment. If you think about the folks who were most effective during the pandemic, it was folks who could move fast and be flexible in an environment that talk about unexpected. If you really want to talk about unexpected, like what happened then in the matter of 30 days, our entire lives changed, and how leaders were able to or not able to adapt to those changing environments, I think made a huge difference. And those are attributes that I think are important for a leader of today.
So if I can sum it up really quickly, what I capture here is vulnerability,
yes,
diversity of experience and identity, and adaptability. Those are the three key principles I pulled away. I love it. That's a great way to end this podcast. And it was a pleasure to spend this time with you today. I really appreciate you taking your time out of what I'm sure is a very busy life. Hopefully we'll get to talk again soon.
I hope so. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. This episode of As Unexpected is sponsored in part by Semester at Sea, a study abroad program where students visit 10 countries on 3 continents, all while taking 3 to 4 college classes through Colorado State University. See course offerings and upcoming voyage itineraries at www.semesteratsea.org.